Islamophobia is socially acceptable again right here in this clip.
Not going to cry a river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. They're terrible people.
Ain't no way he's talking about Palestinians, right? The only ban that hit the Twitch towers wasn't necessarily Asmongold, who apparently got a 14-dayer for the statements that he made. 4 hours of that was talking to Asmongold and trying to walk him off this like far right cliff that he had seemingly jumped off of, took a dive off of, in terms of his commentary on what is permissible bigotry about Arabs and their status, or Palestinians. Some of the commentary is pretty valid, coming from a Palestinian in the community. Watching two people debate whether or not I'm human should have a right to live is really fucking with my head. Yeah, except the thing is, he knows that, like, he knows what my position is. That's not a criticism towards me. A lot of people don't understand this, but like, yeah, when I'm talking to Asmongold, I'm not talking just to Asmongold. I'm talking to his audience. It takes a ton for him to reconsider his stances. It's not about him reconsidering his stances. It's not. It's about people in the margins that are in his audience are going to look at the situation differently after that conversation. Maybe if you're not Muslim or Arab or Palestinian, this might come as a surprise to you, but you can kind of get away with saying whatever the fuck. I'm shocked that he got banned to begin with. Like, I think you can kind of get away with, in mainstream media especially, with saying the most unhinged shit to not only Muslims, about Muslims, directly about Palestinians, directly about Arabs, but also beyond that, you can literally say unhinged shit to defenders of Arabs too. What's surprising is that he got banned at all. I didn't even realize that he was banned. What Asmongold said is not any different than Bill Maher, dog. What are you talking about? Bill Maher says it to a larger audience. The only difference between what Asmongold said and what Bill Maher says on a regular basis is that Bill Maher has 40 years of media training. So he knows not to say certain things so overtly, but the sentiment expressed is exactly the same. The language that Bill Maher uses is still like crafted around like liberal tent poles and liberal cultural signifiers enough that it can like masquerade as polite conversation when what he's saying is identical. The way I view it is, and I will describe this one more time for many of you that simply fail to comprehend this. I rate everything on a curve. That's number one. Number two, I have this understanding, especially as someone whose name is Hasan, who is like a white dude, but still someone who grew up in Turkey, someone who is Muslim, from a Muslim background. I know that the average person is unimaginably Islamophobic. I've dealt with it for damn near a decade since I came to the United States of America. When I'm talking to a person individually and maintaining my composure and working through the steps, step by step, in explaining why someone is bigoted or someone's opinion is wrong or bigoted, offering historically relevant information, there's a reason for that. The reason is I might not change his mentality. Other events might play a larger role in his mentality changing on this matter. But there are a shit ton of people who are watching him who are going to respond to that patience, especially respond to the way that I'm communicating, and most likely be more charitable to what I have to say. Okay. On any number of different fronts. Because that entire conversation is an information faucet for me. Utilizing virtually every opportunity to talk about different aspects of how, for example, freedom of speech is revoked. Things that a lot of people in his community might not be aware of. It's not like I agreed on his framing. It's not like I agreed to anything he was saying. That's my goal. My goal is to change people's minds. Even if his perspective might not change on the matter, there's plenty of people in his community that are going to look at the situation differently. And if I get 100 people, in Asmongold's community to look at the situation a little bit differently, learn something new that they hadn't known, then that's it. That's my goal. I've succeeded. If there was any moment where I was like conceding to his framing on the matter, that would be an entirely different conversation. I'm not going to go in front of like a Ben Shapiro type, for example, who I would categorize as simply different than Asmongold as well. Right? But even if I were to go in front of a Ben Shapiro type and have like a relatively cordial conversation, which I would not be able to maintain composure in a similar capacity to Ben Shapiro. He's a professional speaking head. He's a talking head. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. There's never going to be a world where I concede to his framing on anything. Just like I did not concede to Asmongold's framing on anything either. And that's how you get comments like this. This debate perfectly illustrates my own internal struggle when it comes to forming a kind and normal view of Middle Eastern people. I come from Poland, raised in a conservative family. I watch a lot of Asmon, and I love Hasan's commentary and the way he presents his arguments with solid factual backing. Listening to this for 3 hours and seeing the insane amount of patience and collection Hasan has had throughout, and also listening to Asmon repeat his point that I used to share over and over again. Actually, okay, well, we don't have the rest of the comment. There are a ton of people in this community that were most likely resilient. Couldn't it be said that his perspective gained more ground too? No, absolutely not. Because his perspective is already the most commonly held perspective in the United States of America. Actually helped me finally see how weak, stupid, and sad such belief is. Thank you, Hasan, for doing what you do. My life has become healthier because of you. There you go. There's never a person who I think is above having their mind changed, okay? I think there's no one that is above having their mind and their heart changed. Now, of course, tactically speaking, there are certain people that I'm not going to be as charitable to. My commentary is like water, okay? And if you want to understand my method, basically my method is simple. I speak at the same, I give back the same energy that I take. That's number one. Number two, I'm not going to concede to like shit that I don't agree with, no matter what. But more importantly, okay, I also am consistently, and this is something that like I think marginalized people who are professionals, marginalized people who are professional commentary people understand this. Like always, there's always something in the back of your mind. Like if you are a black political commentator, you know that every single thing that you say is going to be under a microscope by a broad audience of predominantly white people who do not have your understanding of the world, who have never empathized with your position. So if you get really angry, for example, that they're going to, even if you're completely correct, it does not matter. The facts in that situation, no matter how hard they are on your side, are irrelevant. Okay? This is just simply how debates and how commentary and how, existing in America in some ways works. So I am cognizant always of not only the person that I'm talking to and the energy that they give me that I choose to match, but beyond that, I'm also always thinking about the audience and the way that they are responding to it. Islamophobia is baked into every orifice of American society. In the post 9/11 universe, the United States of America needed to do this to justify its endless, bloody war campaign as they ravaged the entirety of the MENA region. And Americans responded to that. A Reddit comment that shows you are right. To be honest, Hasan changed my opinion on it a little bit. Not the fundamental of what Asmon was saying, but my look at Palestine. Hearing someone who heavily understands it and isn't some random Twitter user posting, hey, look at me, was pretty interesting. The fundamentals of what Asmon was saying isn't wrong, and I do mostly agree 100%, but Hasan was pointing out that you can't imply that here the country and its people aren't in a functioning state, be it because of Hamas, Israel, or outside forces. Hasan was pointing out that Palestine as a people and culture hasn't been able to be who they are for decades because they're consistently being bombed and killed. But in the past, when Palestinians were able to be themselves, this kill all non-believers, rapes and kills for fun and concept never existed in their culture. So he wasn't sure why Asmon was assuming that they would. I know some will say, well, they're doing it now. And the point I think Hasan was making is that they is a handful of people, and they're only doing it because there's no established ruling or government and do not represent the rest of the people. The majority of people aren't able to sort this out, stand up or call it out because the country is constantly being destabilized. I don't think going against the only group that's fighting against the constant destabilization is a smart thing to do. It's a die by Hamas or die by Israel situation, in my honest opinion. So the only thing most Palestinians' minds is how to survive the day. That's awesome that this person who still has like resilient Islamophobic sentiment baked into his argument is like so close to fully recognizing the situation. That's it. That is the reason why I try to have these conversations. Okay. And this is being on Reddit. It makes it so crazy. I think that's where the overall problem lay, was that it felt like Asmon was painting a broad brush across Palestine for the actions of a few crazies in other countries, where the majority have no voice or say and are only thinking about when they will be bombed, not who's gay, and we need to get them. Yeah, that's my point, and that's why I do what I do. So if you don't understand the method, it's cool, it's fine. And you can usually say this about any other kind of like marginalized identity that I seek to protect or talk about. You could be like, you're cis. You're a cishet. Man, you don't understand trans issues like that. Why are you arguing with transphobes in the way that you want to argue, that you think is the most successful method, and not in the way that I want you to argue? And you can say that because I'm a cis guy. I'm not trans. So you're right. I mean, you're wrong ultimately, because I know what I'm fucking doing and you don't. but I get it. But you can't really say that about Islamophobia. It's the one thing you can't really say that about me on. That's the one thing, right? So, like, I'm the one getting bomb swabbed at TSA, baby. You can't. So it's funny when white people try to overstep and do that shit, but it's fine. You do you. It's the same thing I say about any kind of group that I defend, that I talk about. It's not for you. If I'm talking about black issues with someone who's anti-black, that's not for black people, bro. That's not. It's for white people. There's a conversation for white people. Most of the conversations that I have when I am talking to an outside group is specifically targeted towards young white men. Okay? So if you sometimes feel like I'm out of pocket in the way that I'm communicating certain things, and it makes you feel a certain type of way, it makes you feel angry, okay? Yeah, well, it's not for you. You already know where I stand. Trust me. You might be able to brush up on certain talking points and effective counters or whatever in terms of messaging when you watch a debate that I might have with someone who's anti-black, but you already have that fucking lived experience. I'm talking to people who don't have that lived experience. I'm using my privilege specifically as an effective communicator that is that looks a certain way, that acts a certain way, that behaves a certain way to break through on a lot of people who would never listen to a black person because of their anti-black status from the start. The goal is to chip away at that, because bigotry is quite resilient, especially when it's consistently being propped up by social conditioning.
Conversation between Hasanabi and Asmongold right now. I'm about an hour into it, and if you're unfamiliar with that conversation, basically Asmongold is coming under fire for saying that Palestinian culture is an inferior culture to that of Western culture because of its roots in Islam, making it more prone to homophobia, transphobia, and more extremist conservative views. And I find Hasan's response to that to be very interesting. I'm going to put this into my own terms, the meaning that I understand and take away from it. Namely, Hasan seems to be saying that there is no such thing as one culture which is inferior to another culture so much as it is one culture which is more or less mature than another culture. And maturity can be hampered or stunted by a lack of material circumstance, and or from the restriction or taking away of material circumstance, a culture might regress, which we might be experiencing here in the United States, unfortunately, at the moment. Now, that's not to say that as cultures mature that they all homogenize into one identical culture. Not at all. Much like individuals, each person develops and matures into their own self. And Hasan goes on to argue that all cultures should be supported insofar as making sure that their material needs are met, so that they have enough autonomy, so that the liberation movements that are necessary for them to mature can occur. But right now, especially in Palestine, they are constantly under attack. They are in survival mode, and when they are in survival mode, there cannot be the necessary steps towards liberation for marginalized people groups. So the first step is to get to a place of stability, get to a place of general liberation from an oppressive regime. And then
that's a good summary.
From there, we should start to hopefully see like cultural maturity. Now, another point that Hasan argues that I would be remiss not to mention is the fact that historically the idea of one culture being inferior to another culture, like inherently in such a way that it cannot necessarily change to become, more mature in those terms. But it's this more static thing of being inferior that has historically been used as an excuse to commit atrocities against people groups, whether it's been indigenous people or black people. So we need to be very...
Because the debate was stupid, he only had one argument. It doesn't matter, because just listen to my words, man. Okay? For 45 to 47,000 people that were listening to Asmongold, this was the first fucking time where they literally heard someone from start to finish describe that there is no inferiority in cultures, that like these guys are too busy fucking surviving to actually turn around and be like, oh, let's do a gay pride parade. You know what I mean? Like, all of this stuff is basically just repackaged historical materialism. All of this stuff is basically explaining American foreign policy and how devastating that has been for entire regions, showcasing like that these places, when they had a crumb of autonomy, were able to actually have a more, I guess, Western focused, like liberally palatable fucking existence. That all went away when fundamentalists came in to the fold as like the number one emancipators and liberators away from the influence of the treacherous parasitic Western imperialist forces. Like, all of this stuff is obviously important for these people to hear. Okay, it doesn't matter what Asmongold's argument is. Like, even if a lot of people are going in there to be like, oh, Asmongold is cooking, he's going to destroy this guy. Like, ultimately, there is still a shit ton of people that hear that for the first time ever when they haven't ever heard about that, and their framework will change.
Very careful in the language that we use when speaking about other cultures, especially cultures that have yet to mature and are under intense oppression. Now, Hasan's take on culture was something I had actually never heard before, and up till hearing it, I actually wasn't entirely sure how I felt about the whole cultural situation. I had heard somebody bring it up to me before, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. I like Hasan's take on this. I'm curious what other people think.
I feel like Hasan's take is basic sociology. There are probably a lot of YouTube vids on the topic that can help you explore further. Maybe trying to find a vid on Maslow's hierarchy. Wonder why they don't teach historical materialism in school. Sounds pretty cool. It's not culture that causes homophobia or whatever. By this logic, I'm a dirty Indian because I'm from an immature culture, not due to material conditions of the subcontinent. Culture is completely separate from social conservatism and social liberalism. Culture is stuff like food, language, dress, literature, and their history. No, absolutely. Culture is just the sum total products that the output that you create as you respond to your material conditions. To be a theory nerd and add on, the political sociologist Charles Tilly, whose most famous theories covered exactly this phenomenon, in that European society's linear timeline of cultural and capitalist progression cannot be applied to countries that have been colonized, specifically the global south, because they have not been afforded the same opportunity for linear progression. But even more, there's also the fact that the global south has been rejected from equity overall. There's also another side of this, which is why I find at least attempts towards socialization, higher degrees of socialization, to be truly unique in terms of development for even other countries that have historically been undermined due to a number of different reasons, but specifically China. When you look at Chinese development, it's insane to consider that they went from humiliation, ritualistic humiliation, and the grips of colonial violence to becoming a fucking superpower that is competitive in the global marketplace with the United States of America damn near overnight. When you look at even the USSR going from a rugged terrain full of potato farmers that were constantly in the grips of famine, and there was still plenty of famine in the USSR as well. Okay, before you blast me for that, going from that to being another fucking superpower, that beat the United States of America to the space race is crazy. Okay, I mean, that is, in my opinion, in my estimation, these are massive fucking leaps. These are massive projects that even at a time when like technological prowess had not caught up, simply the ideological resilience and an interest in doing something different caused so much of this collectivization to occur in such a short period of time without 400 years of chattel slavery and colonial exploit. And a lot of people cannot look at that on an even playing field. One, because they are just simply ill-equipped to understand any of that from a materialist perspective. They just don't, like, there's no way to comprehend it. Like, there is no way to look at the situation with a broader snapshot and try to, I mean, in Russia, they had plenty of history of colonial exploit, as did China, just in the way that the West did. Yes, but their overall standing from their starting point of this project to its peak is insane. It's not like there was any sort of like genuine liberalization initiative or any sort of like, I mean, you had serfdoms. You did not have the bounties of empire to the same degree, in my opinion, that the Western world did, specifically with chattel slavery. From what I understood, his original statement implied that because there are aspects worth criticizing in Palestinian culture, as with any, it allows him to have complete apathy when Israel bombs that society in extinction. I don't know if it was intentional, but it seemed like you passively guided the conversation to a place where you both agreed this notion is ridiculous, and I thought that was nice. Yes. Thank you. That is what I was doing. Especially when I think like one of the major points of contention in that conversation, one of the high notes, was basically when I asked him if he would feel the same way about, like, you know, firebombing a white Alabama enclave that hosts some of the most far-right fucking radical Christians. And obviously he was like, no, I treat American citizens differently. That was it. Yeah, I think one of the most resilient points there is always when I talk about how religion can be a tool for good, it can be a tool for bad. Historically, it has been used for both the justification of chattel slavery and also been used in the abolition of chattel slavery. And ultimately, you don't have an issue with religion. You have an issue with fundamentalists. You have an issue with right-wing conservatism. That's what it is. And I think that's a good thing to separate for a lot of people, because a lot of right-wing conservatives in the United States of America hate other right-wing conservatives that are brown for doing the same shit that they're advocating for here, but more responsive to what is permissible in American society. Obviously, the Westboro Baptist Church can't fucking run around, roam the streets with AR-15s and like throw gay people off the roofs, but they would if they were fucking living in an ISIS-dominated territory of Syria. Okay, they would 100% be doing that shit. Here, they just get their rocks off by fucking calling a gay person that died the F slur at the funeral and then going and eating jalapeno poppers at Applebee's. Like, that's how you also stunt radicalization to a certain degree, by offering people, you know, some material benefits. This does not mean that like American culture is more prosperous or better than others. It simply means that America is has the bounties of empire, and therefore our fucking right-wing nutters here are stunted to a certain degree in comparison to the right-wing nutters everywhere else. Anyway, I hope that people understand. I hope that people understand where I was coming from, what I was doing. I think it was ultimately successful.